Zach Wilson plays his best football, but the Jets fall to the Chiefs. We'll discuss today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, October 2nd, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making this show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you're listening on a podcast source and enjoy the show, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out and help other Jets fans find the show. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, the Jets lost last night on Sunday Night Football to the Kansas City Chiefs, 23-20. Today we're going to recap the game, a wild game. The first time the Jets are on Sunday Night Football since the year 2011, a 12-year gap, and I don't know what it is about this 2023 Jets team, but they played 4 games. 2 of them have been home games on prime time. And whenever this team plays on prime time, it's wild because the first quarter of this game, it felt like we were heading for an embarrassing. It felt like we were heading for the kind of game Denver suffered last week in Miami, where the Jets looked like they were going to lose by 50. I mean, they were so bad in the first quarter of that game that I think it was fair to question whether the team had quit, because they couldn't do anything. They couldn't get anything going offensively. The defense was having breakdown after breakdown. It was 17-0 Kansas City after the first quarter. And then after that point, the Jets found some life. And I think that if we're talking about this loss, it's disappointing to lose. It's very disappointing to fall to 1-3. You don't get these losses back. And this was a game that was there for the taking for the Jets against the defending Super Bowl champion. But I got to be honest with you, long-term, my takeaway from this game is the performance of Zach Wilson, because I think this was the best game Zach Wilson's played as a pro. In fact, I was trying to think through what were the games where Zach Wilson looked genuinely promising in his first 2 seasons. And I can really only come up with 2. I give you the game against Tennessee, his rookie season, but that was really just him making a bunch of big passes on broken plays in the fourth quarter and overtime. Then there was the second to last game, his rookie season against Tampa Bay. But again, that was like him looking competent. It was him standing in the pocket making reads. This was like the first time Zach Wilson looked like something resembling a big-time quarterback, because he was throwing guys open. I mean, he was making passes that weren't there, where there was no window to be made. I mean, there was, especially that drive in the third quarter where the Jets scored a touchdown to tie it. That was a drive where he looked like Aaron Rodgers, where guys weren't open. Somehow he was still finding windows and placing the ball perfectly. This was Zach Wilson playing with a lot of confidence. And I think that confidence can play a big role, because what really got him going was a deep ball he hit to Allen Lazard in the second quarter. And I got to be honest with you, I thought it was a very ill-advised throw. I mean, he kind of just threw that ball up for grabs. It was it easily could have been intercepted if it had been played better by the defensive back. But that pass ended up completed. And again, that just seemed to give him confidence, because from that point forward, he was decisive with the football. Even in the pocket, when the pocket was crumbling, he knew where to move. There was none of the backpedaling. There was none of the spin move. There was none of the 30 yards moving backwards. The Jets have had a lot of disappointing young quarterbacks over the last 15 years. And at least most of them had given you a game or two, or more than that, where they looked really good. The issue with these young quarterbacks was that they could never put it together consistently. Mark Sanchez had some outstanding individual games with the Jets. Sam Darnold had some outstanding individual games with the Jets. Geno Smith, less so, but still had a couple of really good games. Zach Wilson, part of the problem with him is that it's been difficult to dream that he could be a big-time quarterback, because his best has just not been that good. Even when he's been good, it's been games like last year in the home game against Buffalo where, he played well enough, and the Jets, of course, won the game, so you give him that. But it's like a lot of 5-yard first read being open, and he just gets the ball there. It's nothing that's super impressive. This was super impressive. I was really happy with the way Zach Wilson played in this game. It's funny because his numbers aren't that good, He averaged less than 7 yards per attempt, which is kind of a baseline. I mean, he threw for 245 yards, 28 of 39, 6.3 per attempt. He did have 2 touchdowns, however. But I think if you're watching the game, sometimes the stats don't tell the whole story. I think Zach Wilson was better than the stats. I mean, he left some plays on the field. He missed a throw to Garrett Wilson in the end zone that could have turned into a touchdown. And, the start of the game was a little rough, although I think there were other aspects of the offense that failed. But as much as anything, I feel like this game was important because in the entire week leading up to this game, I had said that I felt like this was kind of like the make or break game for the Jets. And one of my big concerns was that if Zach Wilson imploded in this game, we'd get right back to the point, because you saw it last week. You saw that there were some issues on the sideline. In fact, Aaron Rodgers, it's one thing for me to say it. Aaron Rodgers came in this week, and he was obviously at the game, and there were reports he addressed the team. And he said, "You guys got to stop pointing the finger." So that tells me that something that was happening on the sideline even if it got overblown, something that was happening on the sideline last week was raising alarm bells, even with the regular starting quarterback for this team, Aaron Rodgers. So my concern was that the Jets lose this game, fall to 1-3. You could be right back to a situation where you were last year, where clearly the locker room had issues with Zach Wilson. Clearly they were not buying into the young quarterback. Even though the Jets lost this game, this locker room's not going to be divided this week. If anything, this locker room is going to be more confident in Zach Wilson going forward, because he hit some really impressive passes in this game. He moved the offense very well. And I'll give Nathaniel Hackett credit. Nathaniel Hackett criticized him last week, and I criticized him because he called a miserable game. Sometimes what happens when the team goes out and plays well, remember when Hackett was criticized? Well, he was criticized because he stunk last week. But just as you criticize when somebody stinks, Nathaniel Hackett called an excellent game in this one, where he always felt like he was a step ahead of Steve Spagnuolo, and he knew how to get Zach Wilson into good situations. So some credit to Nathaniel Hackett, but Zach Wilson really took the lead in this game. It's football. And I don't know what it means. The thing in the NFL is that you're always 1 week away from changing the narrative. And sometimes that's a good thing, because last week the narrative with Zach Wilson was he played a terrible game against New England. Is he going to be benched? The Jets bring in Trevor Siemian. How long is it going to take for Siemian to take over in the starting lineup, just because Zach Wilson looked so lost in that game against New England? Well, all it took was one good game against Kansas City to turn things around. The reverse is true this coming week. A game in Denver that I'm going to say the Jets should win this game. And if they don't, then we're kind of right back to where we were after New England. And that's been one of the issues with Zach Wilson, is that it's always been, again, I don't think he's played that great in his career, but when he's had relatively positive games, he's never been able to stack another one on top. He's always struggled the next week. It always feels like whenever he's made a bit of progress, he doesn't build on the momentum. But at least for 1 week, the Jets can feel like, maybe there's some sort of turning point we're seeing here, because this was an excellent performance by Zach. And it may be the first time I feel like, we've seen him win consistently from the pocket and elevate the team. It's one thing to just kind of be throwing 5-yard passes when you have a simple design and try and lean on the run game. It's another thing to actually be elevating the team. And in this game, I think the team was elevated by the quarterback play Zach Wilson provided. Now, unfortunately, while there were many good performances in this game, Zach Wilson among them, the Jets made a lot of mistakes. And if you're asking why the Jets lost this game, well, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, there was one bad call in the fourth quarter, or at least one suspect call, but really the Jets were the biggest reason they lost this game. They couldn't get out of their own way at too many key points. As we continue this Monday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the way the Jets led to their own demise in this one. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Last week, when the Jets were looking for a veteran quarterback to back up Zach Wilson, I don't know that they needed to use LinkedIn Jobs to find Trevor Siemian. They have a scouting department, but LinkedIn Jobs could be your business's scouting department. It's easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, then add the job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. And simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. This is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, then bonus episodes as needed, such as post-game shows. When there's a big injury, we'll have bonus episodes. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we are recapping a Jets loss. They fall 23-20 to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, a lot of attention in the fan base is being paid to a call, which I think was shaky in the fourth quarter that went against Sauce Gardner. The Jets had a chance to get off the field. Not only did they have a chance to get off the field, it actually wiped off an interception. Jets are trailing 23-20 late in the fourth quarter. An interception goes off the board. Kansas City gets a second chance on a third down play, or Kansas City gets to continue the drive because Sauce Gardner's called for a holding penalty. So instead of having the ball with a chance to tie or take the lead, Kansas City keeps control of the ball, and they eventually get enough first downs to run out the clock. And I will tell you, I think that call hurt the Jets. I think it was a bad call. I'd love to tell you that call cost the Jets the game, but quite frankly, it did not. The Jets never led in this game. And I think it's difficult to blame a call when you never lead, when you don't have a single lead all game, and when you're behind by multiple scores most of the game. It's tough for me to look at this and say that call cost the Jets the game, because the Jets did so much to lead to their own demise in this one. And you have to begin with the first quarter, where this team came out, and at least I said it earlier, they were so bad in that first quarter that I wondered whether this team had quit on the coaching staff. Now they came back to life, and we saw, especially in quarters 2 and 3, maybe not so much in the fourth quarter, but quarters 2 and 3, that was the Jets playing their best football. If the Jets play like that, if the Jets play anything resembling that, they're going to have a winning season. They will fight back from this 1-3 record. The question is that is that consistent, or is that just the Jets playing at their peak level? We'll find out in the days and weeks ahead. But the Jets came out and fell behind 17-0, and I got to be honest with you, I felt like it was more about the Jets being bad than Kansas City being good. I think that the pass rush was, now the Chiefs' offensive line did a good job, but the Jets allowed 2 30-plus yard touchdowns in that first quarter. They allowed the Chiefs to go right down the field on the first drive and get a field goal. And you know something? I know the Jets fought back, but here's the thing. When they were down 17-0 after the first quarter, that means that you essentially have to beat the defending Super Bowl champions by 18 points over the next 45 minutes. I think when the team comes back, we don't pay attention to how tall of a task it is. If the Jets outscore the Chiefs by 16 points, the defending Super Bowl champions, if you outscore them by 16 points over the next 45 minutes, a tall order, you still lose the game. And that's why it's so critical to not fall into a hole like that, because you need everything to go perfect. And you can't have anything go wrong, like a bad call that goes against you in the fourth quarter, because you've put yourself in such a big hole. Those points don't go away. You allowed Kansas City to bank those 17 points. And when you lose 23-20 and you gave up 17 in the first quarter, it's kind of easy to see where the primary blame for this loss goes. But I mean, there were other mistakes. As I mentioned, Zach Wilson in another otherwise really good game did miss Garrett Wilson, who was open deep on a route running to the end zone. So there were just a lot of plays like that where they couldn't. I think the Jets actually scored on that drive, so maybe that one doesn't count. But Tyler Conklin not coming up with the ball in the end zone. And then, on that drive when Sauce Gardner got flagged, you do have to note that the Jets had 5 other opportunities to get off the field, and only one of them was a short yardage situation. And when I say they had 5 other opportunities, 2 of those 5 were actually plays where Kansas City was penalized. So there's a flag thrown on Kansas City. If the Jets get the stop there, they can just decline the penalty. But they allowed the Chiefs to convert, which gave the Chiefs another chance. And on both instances, the Chiefs were able to get the first down. So, it's one thing to say Jets had a bad call go against them. Here's the thing, though. There were so many plays the Jets could have made that would have made a difference in this game. And it includes the whole first quarter. So I look at this and I say, you know what? The Jets made too many mistakes to lose. I don't think the Jets deserve to win this game. It's unfortunate because we saw the best of the Jets in the second half. We saw the Jets look like the better team. Quite frankly, the final 45 minutes of the game, the Jets were the better team. Kansas City was a little bit better in the fourth quarter, but the Jets dominated this game for long stretches. And if they had shown any life in the first quarter, they would have won this game by multiple scores, because the Chiefs, once the pass rush started to heat up led by Bryce Huff, and can we get this man some more snaps, please, Jets coaching staff? I mean, can we stop limiting Bryce Huff's snaps? He's only the best pass rusher on the team right now. And Bryce Huff actually sparked the Jets with the penalty he drew in the end zone, which probably should not have been. If we're talking blown calls, the play that sparked the Jets was probably a blown call because Huff was, they committed a penalty on Huff at the 1 yard line, and it was called a safety because essentially if they called it that the penalty was committed in the end zone, it was not. But Huff sparked this team, and at the time it felt like not a big deal. It felt like, oh, the Jets aren't going to be shut out at 17-2. That got the Jets going, and from that point forward, there was just new life in this team. There was a different energy, and Mahomes had a lot of trouble with the pass rush. I mean, he threw officially 2 interceptions. The third interception was wiped off on the Sauce Gardner penalty. It just kind of felt like the Jets pass rush was in his head because those were ridiculous interceptions he was throwing. And I give the Jets some credit for it. I mean, even though I guess they were kind of on forced errors, it kind of just felt like Mahomes was a little bit rattled. He was not himself against this Jets pass rush. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, you got a little bit of everything. You got Zach Wilson playing well. You had Garrett Wilson contributing. Lazard making a couple of plays. The first time Alan Lazard's made plays in his tenure with the Jets. Breece Hall breaking a big run. This was kind of like the dream scenario for the Jets, at least the second and third quarters, because the Jets played their best football. The Jets showed you that they can be a good team, and they have the pieces. I don't think that this was. I don't think it was a total anomaly that the Jets went out there and played that well. There are some quality players on this football team. This is not the Adam Gase team of 3 years ago. This is a team that has a lot of quality players. If they just played up to their standard, we'd be talking about the Jets being 2-2. And it's one of the frustrating things about the NFL because the difference in the NFL between 11-6 and 6-11 is not that great. And if you look at what the Jets have done this year, I mean, the Dallas game was a total loss, but the Jets are a couple of plays the last 2 weeks from being 3-1. If the Jets are 3-1, I mean, this season feels totally different. That said, they got to fight through it. And I think you did see some positives. I think more than anything, the Jets beat themselves. And it's in some ways it's good because that if the Jets clean these mistakes up, which should not happen to nearly the degree that they happened in this game, they're going to win some games. But it's also frustrating because the last 2 weeks they've thrown away games that were quite winnable. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the next week. Jets have a trip to Denver coming up. It's a must-win game. All the good that we're talking about here, even in this loss, probably goes away if they lose it. We'll discuss a little bit more detail as we continue this Monday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The Jets beat the spread against the Kansas City Chiefs. They were 9-point underdogs. They only lost by 3. So I guess if you're a Jets fan and you had some money down on them, perhaps that's a silver lining. Jets are heading on the road for a game against a bad Denver team, but the early line has the Jets as underdogs. If you want to make some money, check out FanDuel. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The apps are so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. The Jets lose to Kansas City 23-20. They fall to 1-3 on the season. Heading into this game, I really felt like the Jets season was on the line, that they needed to get an upset of the Chiefs to save this season. I come away actually feeling a little bit differently, and I'll explain to you why I feel differently. It's not because I'm a big believer in moral victories, but heading into the season with Aaron Rodgers, if you told me the Jets would start out 1-3, I wouldn't have been thrilled, but I would have said, okay, fine. They can figure out a way out of that. The schedule should get softer at the end of the season. Things should get better. I did not feel that way heading into this game. And part of it's, you have to think about what's this team capable of doing. And the way the Jets had looked through the first 3 weeks of the season, it made me feel like this team was not really capable of going on a big run. It made me feel like they needed to stay in the range of 500 because I didn't see a big winning streak based on the way they were playing. When you talk about the way Zach Wilson was looking, we talk about the way the offensive line was looking, when you talk about the way Nathaniel Hackett was calling plays, we talk about the way the defense was underachieving a little bit, especially that defensive line. I said, you know what? Jets fall behind. I don't see a big winning streak. In this game last night, we saw a team that looks capable of ripping off a winning streak. And I know they lost, but that was against the Super Bowl champions. If the Jets play that caliber of football, they're going to win a lot of games. In fact, if they played that caliber of football for maybe 5 minutes longer, they probably would have won this game. It was just the first quarter they were sleepwalking. I can't understand. And it's funny again because you look at this and you say, well, they came back, so maybe the first quarter didn't matter. The first quarter was like the difference in the game. That was where Kansas City put all their points on the board. Outside of they had the field goal in the fourth quarter, but that was really where Kansas City did their damage. If Kansas City doesn't have that first quarter, they lose this game pretty handily. But you saw the Jets dominate the Super Bowl champions for about 30 minutes. And, look, the NFL is any given Sunday. You see bad teams beat good teams all the time. You don't want to read too much into any one game because it's entirely possible that this was just the Jets, first of all, playing at an unsustainably bad level in the first quarter and then at an unsustainably good level in quarters 2 and 3. And that happens. Every team in the league has stretches where they can do no right and stretches where they can do no wrong. Usually it doesn't happen. Usually those stretches don't happen to occur in the same game. But we saw the Jets show some ability. None of this matters if they don't go out to beat Denver next weekend. Now, I think the season's definitely on the line heading to Denver because I don't think this team can afford to go 1-4. Because beyond that, you have a game against a really good Philadelphia team that's going to be very difficult for the Jets to win. So you can't lose this game. And beyond that, in the NFL, and I've talked about this a little bit earlier on the show, the narrative changes from week to week. Last week, the narrative was about the Jets having no ability to do anything on offense. Hackett being terrible, Zach Wilson being terrible. And in all honesty, I know in New York, these things can be taken a little bit far. I don't think it was unfair to say those things last week. The narrative has changed, but it's only 1 week away. And Zach Wilson, through his career, it feels like every time he's put a positive game together, he's followed it up with a really bad game. And in the NFL, it's all about consistency. It's all about what you do from week to week. Lots of guys are capable and lots of teams are capable of putting together a really good 60 minutes. I mean, we saw the Adam Gase Jets put together some great 60-minute stretches. Anybody in the NFL is really good. Any team in the NFL is comprised of really good players. Even the worst player in the NFL is still an excellent football player. You can't stick around in the NFL. You can't be on a 53-man roster unless you're a really good player capable of occasionally doing something really good. The question is whether they can stack this performance. The question is whether they feel good about themselves and are just going to go into Denver and be overconfident, or whether they feel like, what, we found something here. We need to be motivated after this loss. We're going to show Denver how good we are. Denver may have won yesterday. This is not a good team. This is a game that if you have designs on being a solid football team like the Jets do this year, this is a game you have to go out and win on the road. And Denver's never an easy place to go. It's one of my least favorite road venues. I mean, even when the Broncos are bad, I think it's tough. It can be a tough place to play. But, you look at the schedule, this is a game that's got to be a win. I think that's all there is to it. And the Jets need to build on the good things they did. They need to get rid of, forget about the bad things they did. They need to build on the good things they did. If they do that, then this season can turn around. But they can't go, they can't go to 1-4 because if they're 1-4 and they have Philly coming in, then you get to 1-5. And I don't care who you are. You start 1-5, you're in a really bad spot in the NFL. So this game against Denver becomes critical. Maybe this game against Kansas City was not the season decider. Maybe this game was less critical than I counted on because perhaps this offense has a little bit more to it than I thought. Perhaps this defense is finally starting to click a little bit because they gave Patrick Mahomes a lot of problems in this game. And if you can give Patrick Mahomes problems, you can give practically any quarterback problems. But none of this matters unless they go out to Denver and win. So maybe a 1-week reprieve. But the Jets need to start winning games soon. It's not enough to have positive moments anymore. Maybe against Kansas City it is. It's not against Denver. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source and enjoy the show, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help us out and help other Jets fans find the show. Hope you have a great Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.